This time on Gamers Week podcast.
See, the thing is, people call it the worst game of all time, right? E.T. is the worst game of all time. And, I don't believe that for a second. I know that E.T. is not the worst game, but to tell you the truth, I really prefer it when people do identify it as the worst game of all time. I kind of like that.
Really?
Yeah, because Yars Revenge is frequently cited as one of the best games of all time. So as long as E.T. is the worst game, I have the greatest range of any game designer in history. And I'm proud of that distinction.
That's quite a flex, yeah.
You've got both sides of the coin.
Are you ready? Was that a yes?
Yes.
Yeah. I hosted last week, so it's somebody else.
Waiting on you.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Gamers Week podcast. Like the name says, we analyze the best, worst, and weirdest headlines of the past week in the video game industry. This is episode 12. Today is Wednesday, March 9th, 2022, and my name is Ryan Payne, aka Retro Gamers, aka Professor Rybread, aka the greatest man alive. And I have with me two of my fantastic co-hosts.
We're just going to skip right past it, I guess.
Blue Williams, as well as Donnie G Retro. How are you guys doing tonight?
Pretty good. I'm still waiting to hear the backstory on this, though.
On the greatest man alive?
Right.
It's just facts. There's no
just
other
facts.
Should we ask for sources, or
are you?
You know what? I'm going to say, based off of my excellent credibility, you don't have to ask for sources. You can believe me.
Oh.
Are you getting these facts from The Onion? Asking for a friend.
Moving on. To celebrate 12 episodes. Yes, it's a weird milestone, but just go with it. We've got a very special guest joining us later in the show, Howard Scott Warshaw. He worked for Atari Games from 1981 to 1984, where he developed Yars Revenge, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the infamous E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial.
Only from Atari. Made especially for systems from Atari. The video game that lets you help E.T. get home. Just in time for Christmas.
So before we jump into anything else, why don't we check out our reviews, reactions, and requests, as Donnie put it, R cubed. And our first one is from Mr. Thou. I feel like I missed out on an important part of my childhood by not playing the version of Street Fighter that featured Cammy. Chun-Li was always my Street Fighter crush growing up, but damn Cammy. I would have made her my favorite immediately. And yes, it's the blonde, but also the beret.
Is there like a dating service that's for berets?
Beretsonly.com.
Gonna check out my only berets. All right, next up from Holy Headshot. Had a blast listening to Donnie commit 7 forms of gaming heresy during the poll. Great show. Missed Retro Gamers. Aw. But Retro Blast did an awesome job of filling in. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Holy Headshot.
Indeed. Thank you.
And the last one, the French Pet Podcast, hand down the best Ashley Graham from Resident Evil 4 impression to ever grace the podcast space. Patrick, you are amazing, sir.
I don't know how many of those are in the running, but Patrick will take it, I'm sure.
Excellent.
And now it's time for the... very important poll.
How incredibly anticlimactic.
That was underwhelming. My expectations were so high, and then nothing.
Don't put a lot of faith in me then. Every Monday on Twitter, we post our VIP, very important poll. If you'd like to participate, follow us on Twitter at GamersWeekPC. This past Sunday, we were guests on the Latest Podcast, a video game trivia show. We'll put a link to that episode in the show notes. And we were asked this question as part of their Latest Feud game. What is the first video game that comes to mind when you hear the phrase 90s RPG? Our choices for this particular poll were Final Fantasy VI, otherwise known as Final Fantasy III, coming in at 21.3%. I feel like you always have to say that. There's always going to be those people that when you say Final Fantasy III, like, oh, you mean Final Fantasy VI? No. Did you live in Japan? No, you didn't. You lived in North America. So you play Final Fantasy III.
I am so that guy, by the
way. Actually.
Yep.
Final Fantasy VII came in at 28.1%, other with 19.1%, and your winner, voted most recognizable 90s RPG, Chrono Trigger at 31.5%. Were you really surprised?
Honestly, yes. I think that reflects the crowd that we interact with who takes the poll.
Right? So let's look at some of the answers from the other category. At Jeffman1490 says Super Mario RPG. He's not wrong. At Dreamcast Sagata says Grandia. At Bella Gaming 10, honestly, I drew a blank at first, but I'll go with Star Ocean. At Noman Looney, Baldur's Gate, of course. And at Ludo Timbo with the best possible answer. Everybody knows it's Mystic Quest. Come on now.
And if memory serves me correct, you brought that up on the Latest Podcast.
I did bring up Mystic Quest.
You started it.
Now, I'm going to save my comment for last. Blue, what is your most recognizable 90s RPG? What did you pick?
The absolute first game that came to mind was Final Fantasy VII, which I don't want to get crucified for this, but I don't even like Final Fantasy VII. But people just went nutter butters over that game. It was everywhere. Everywhere you turned, there was Final Fantasy VII. So when I think of 90s RPGs, that's what I think of, even though I didn't play it much.
Okay. Ryan, what about you?
So when I think of 90s, I guess my brain is more stuck in the like Super Nintendo era when it comes to RPGs. So realistically, the first thing that comes to mind when I think of quote unquote 90s RPG is actually Earthbound. Even though I think Chrono Trigger is the best of all time, Earthbound to me is that game that has all of the quirkiness. It's got a fantastic story, great music when it comes down to it. So to me, that's like, it draws in all of the what you would call themes of most 90s RPGs and kind of puts it all in together in a beautiful package.
It does kind of have a 90s sense of humor.
It does, right? You know, it's a lot of it's toilet humor. And it's like that feeling of like, this is rad, dude, you know? So for sure.
Well, and here's the thing with when you say 90s RPG, there was, I mean, early 90s, mid 90s, late 90s. It's to me, it's like a different era in each one of those subsections. Mm-hmm. So to say that this is the 90s RPG, it kind of is like, but is it really? Or is it part of this particular 90s RPG for the 16-bit systems, 90s RPG for the 32, 64-bit systems, et cetera, et cetera?
Right. So what is your choice, Donnie?
So I did end up choosing, I believe it was Final Fantasy III, but there's a caveat to that because my post actually mentioned Dragon Warrior 2, which, as you pointed out, was released in like 1987 or something like that.
In Japan,
Yeah, you got actually.
And it wasn't released in North America until 1990. So we had Dragon Warrior 2, 3, 4, and I believe 5?
Nope, 2, 3, and 4.
2, 3, or 4? Okay, so 2, 3, and 4 in the 90s, but nobody really talks about Dragon Warrior.
And which is a shame. It's a really fantastic series. It just didn't do well. So for one, the carts are actually pretty hard to find and they're expensive. So there's like that barrier to entry when it comes to the Dragon Warrior series. It's also not like terribly, I would say, profound in several of the entries. So like the first and second one are pretty basic when it comes to...
Very basic.
I mean, what do you want from an NES RPG?
And that's it, is that I think often what we were so spoiled by what you could accomplish on a 16-bit system and beyond, that an 8-bit RPG is as basic as it gets almost. So it's difficult to really get out of it. But like 3 and 4 are fantastic, especially from a story element. So yeah, it's not comparing apples to apples. It's like saying, well, I think Ryan's a really good football player, and then realizing that I'm on JV. All right, so why don't we go ahead and do our patron shout-outs for the week, Blue?
We couldn't do what we do without the help of our gorgeous patrons. Here are the generous folks supporting Gamers Week on Patreon. BNT Zilla Guy, Geek With That, Crunchy Kong, Sheriff Snacks, Frank Grande, Producer BTW, Steven Sand, Terry Kinnair, Ducks in Disguise, Jim and Colleen, Games with Coffee, Davey PGH, the Red Ox PDX family, including Shannon and Luke, Zach Huge Thanks, Random Retro Dude, Michael Lundeen, Princess Kitty Mew Mew, Mega Retro Man, Emo-esque, Rybread's #1 fan, Fruitcake's #1 stan, The Wizard of Zardoz, Clayman 71, and Great Saiyaman 81. If you like what you hear today, and we really hope you do, please consider joining us on Patreon. Your support helps cover the cost of producing the show, as well as other cool stuff we'll be doing, like prizes and giveaways. You'll also gain access to our weekly patron-only bonus cast called Gamers Week Uncut, Patrons with Benefits. Visit patreon.com/gamersweek or follow the link in the show notes to learn more.
Awesome. So today we're going to just jump straight into headlines. And of course, we've only got one headline for the day, one of the biggest announcements that happened. Thank you, Sony, so much for dropping this on a Wednesday.
Seriously.
You helped us out, fam.
Absolutely. And we've got Howard Scott Warshaw's interview coming up here shortly. So that's going to be a large portion of today's episode as well. So I'm going to do things a little bit differently, but I think we're covering the big good stuff. All right, from IGN, State of Play, March 2022, everything announced. PlayStation held its first State of Play event of 2022 today, with a focus on games coming from Sony's Japanese partners. From new IPs like Capcom's Exoprimal to Returnal's update bringing campaign co-op to a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure fighting game, here's all of the news and trailers from today's Sony State of Play.
Exoprimal is a brand new IP from Capcom that has some serious Dino Crisis vibes, including an homage in the trailer. The game also seems to feature online multiplayer, so you'll be able to take down hundreds of dinos alongside your friends. We don't have an exact release date, but we know it's coming to PS5 and PS4 sometime next year.
This one seems interesting, but
it seems really strange.
Yes.
Like, okay, can you imagine the pitch though? Is like, hear me out. There's a big black hole in the sky and it starts vomiting dinosaurs out just randomly. And you have to go clean up the dinosaurs, like a Muso-style dinosaur game.
I think the whole vomiting dinosaurs was an afterthought. That was, we're running out of time. How do we get the dinosaurs on the planet? You know what? Black hole. There you go.
Right?
Yep. That'll work. Go with it.
Or somebody went back in time and opened up a big vortex and said, all right, guys, hey, come here, dinos. Chase me. I've got some meat. Chase me. Suck them all into the future.
That's how the dinosaurs went extinct. They just got sucked into the future. It wasn't an asteroid.
Based on the gameplay I've seen, it's Overwatch meets Dino Crisis.
Exactly. Meets Left 4 Dead.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, I'm fighting a horde of dinosaurs that it's taking the place of zombies. I don't like the whole zombies thing when it comes to like Call of Duty games and the big hordes just coming at me. And I'm just like mowing them down, reloading, mowing them down. That doesn't seem interesting.
I'm sure there's definitely people out there who are super excited about this, but I agree. I'm not the kind of person that's really into that genre, mostly because I take pills for anxiety and I don't need any additional anxiety in my life.
No black hole dinosaurs for Ryan.
Right. That just seems like it's going to make it worse. Like, hey, doc, I need to up my prescription.
I think the bigger issue is if somebody had told you before the State of Play that Capcom was going to announce a brand new IP, would any part of you have expected this?
No, never in a million years.
That would have been hyped. A new IP from Capcom?
Are we getting fighting? Are we getting platform, action, adventure? No, you're getting Overwatch, but with dinosaurs.
Okay, next up, Luminous Productions Forspoken was just delayed from May 25th to October 11th, but players looking forward to the game got another glimpse of gameplay during today's State of Play. The footage showed the protagonist, Frey, roaming around the open world, taking on fantasy-inspired foes like dragons, undead creatures, and more. So, I'm on the fence about this one. It looks really cool. Definitely. I think the combat especially looks really neat. And I do love open world games, but I'm not sold on the story, even though we don't know much, but it's basically a modern day New Yorker gets magically sucked over to this fantasy world, She gets transported to the fantasy world.
Well, there's a pause, magically sucked over.
And she's the chosen one. I was like, okay, I'm gonna need more than that to want to be engaged in the story part, but the gameplay looks fun.
Right, and a game that was supposedly supposed to release on May 25th, you figured would have a little bit more substance in the trailer itself. But I mean, now it's releasing October 11th, but still, You would think at this point they would explain a little bit more than just, I don't know, but
maybe not. I mean, we got gameplay. That's the big thing that everybody wants. Give us gameplay. We want to see it. So It looked good. When this comes out, I'll be keeping an eye on it. I want to see what the reviews say. I want to see what people I know, what they think of it. And we'll go from there.
Safe bet.
I'm all about safe bets. No.
There you go.
All right, next up, TMNT, the Cowabunga Collection, features 13 classic TMNT games, including Turtles in Time. Also shown in the State of Play trailer was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Tournament Fighters, the arcade game Back from the Sewer, Fall of the Foot Clan, the Manhattan Project, Radical Rescue, and the Hyperstone, which should be Heist, by the way. They forgot a word. The game is coming to PS4 and PS5 this year. Squee!
Yeah, actually, they're not going to say it in the State of Play, but it's coming basically everywhere. Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S is coming to Switch, it's coming to PC. There's supposed to be online co-op where it fits. So $40 collection. I don't know if a lot of people I've heard saying $40 is way too much for what's essentially a collection of ROMs.
Right.
I will be getting this. I might hold out a little bit to see if we get a physical release somewhere, maybe from like limited run games.
Right.
Ooh, that would be good.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see that.
And again, it's giving me the opportunity to realize a childhood dream of playing Turtles in Time or the arcade game or Hyperstone Heist with friends via co-op online. So
yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah, that's definitely the biggest part of this that makes me want to grab it day one for sure.
Yeah, that's the only reason why I would want to grab it, because I pretty much own all of the different games here that have been mentioned. They're all separately. But if I can play these games over the internet with my friends, have a good time, and say, let's go take on Shredder in Turtles in Time and see if we can beat it. Sure. Okay, great. That's a nice thing to do. But for $40, I might get you when you come down to $19.99.
And what I will do is I will play Turtles in Time with Donnie anytime. He owns a few of the world records in some of the time attack pieces of that. So what I will gladly do.
How many world records do you have, Donnie?
I have 4. So all 3 time trials in Turtles in Time, I own the world record for, and then Outrun, I own the world record in points for Sega Genesis.
Fancy.
I am a bougie boy.
Nice of you to slum it with us.
Hey, I had a world record once. I was the youngest person in the entire world.
Oh, boo.
Dad joke time.
That's not even a dad joke. That's just bad.
Now, I will say that you two personally helped me achieve those world records, because Ryan, I got my copy of Turtles in Time from you, and Blue, I got my copy of Outrun from you guys.
This is true.
So you guys played a part in me obtaining these 2 world records. So when you see Donnie G Retro up there on the record board or the leaderboards, the asterisk underneath him should say Blue and Ryan.
But it won't.
No, it won't. There was nowhere else you could have played them if we hadn't pitched in.
I mean, I could have, but it's like they probably would have fell flat. I was like, oh, you mean I got to go out and get the cartridge? No, I can postpone that for another week.
And why is it so much work to go get a world record? Oh my God.
Trek to Yomi looks like a gorgeous homage to classic samurai films, and we got our best look at it yet in today's state of play. It appears to feature intense one-on-one sword combat, as well as platforming and exploration through a black and white world. The game is coming this spring to PS5 and PS4.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
This is the game. This is the game that I want. It looks like a combination of Sifu, like if Sifu was directed by Kurosawa.
I think this was the one game that they released today, or that they showed, that I was most excited about.
For sure.
And it's coming this spring, so soon.
Right. How soon?
Soon.
I was a little shocked though at first when they were kind of bringing in this trailer, and then all of a sudden somebody slices someone else's head off. I was like, all right, I guess we're into this. Okay.
It's samurais. What do you want?
I mean, yeah, but I guess I was just expecting that to come later in the trailer, not immediately. Like ease me into the gore.
Violence always seems more tasteful in black and white.
There you go. That's why
I will agree with you on that. I never was a black and white fan of anything whenever I was a kid and growing up. But then as an adult, I've come to appreciate that medium more. And I can sit there and watch a black and white movie or show and not have a problem with it. So now that it's transitioning over into video games, and it's very nicely done, I think I'll check this out.
Yes.
My one question is, recently, in the last probably 5 years, we've had this explosion of really good samurai-based games. Prior to that, I mean, I can't think of many samurai-based games that were really done well and done in a style that matched my expectations. And over the last 5 years, we've started to see that. And it's always made me wonder, thinking back, like, why wasn't this more of a popular style of gameplay? Because what's coming out now is fantastic. So it's always made me wonder why this hasn't been as popular or more popular in the past.
We as a society weren't ready for it. Also, you have a PS4, so freaking play Ghost of Tsushima.
Fine.
I need to play that as well. I mean,
Both of you.
I still haven't played the Spider-Man game for the PS4.
That's embarrassing coming from a guy with a Spider-Man tattoo.
I know, and I'm actually getting more of it done. Like I started playing it, and then I just kind of like, well, it transitioned back to PC. It almost seems like I'm not really a console person anymore.
That's fair.
If Ghosts of Tsushima comes down to like $15 or $19 or whatever, I'll pick it up.
But it won't do
No
you
question.
to pick it up on console if you won't play it.
I will. I'll play it eventually. I've got Elden Ring. I still need to play that. It's sitting right here in my hand, and it's sealed, and I haven't touched it yet.
Now that you could have gotten on PC.
Could I have?
Did you hear his voice?
It's on PC.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, you don't know what you don't know.
That's deep. Okay, moving on. PlayStation 5 exclusive Returnal is getting a huge free update later this month. Titled Ascension, the update brings 2-player campaign co-op to the game, as well as a brand new survival mode about scaling a tower, taking out waves upon waves of Returnal's enemies as you go. It won't be long until you can dive into this new content, as the update drops on March 22nd, 2022. I have this game. It's still on the shelf. I need to get to it, but it is great that it's getting free DLC, essentially
Right.
DLC, free new game modes, whatever. It's free. More game for free. That's awesome.
So there isn't anything, like any particular reason you haven't. It's just I haven't gotten around to it because of my backlog.
Yes, I just haven't
it.
gotten to it. We got the PS5 and got like 5 games, and I've been behind ever since.
And now you just keep adding to it.
And Blue, by the way, since you're the only one who has a PS5 right now, you are the person that has to buy every single PS5 exclusive game so that we have something to go off of when we talk about
Okay.
this stuff. So, I mean, get on top of that.
Well, I mean, to be fair, there's hardly any PS5 exclusive games.
How many are there? Do you know offhand?
I don't. I would have to look it up.
Yeah.
But it seems like most everything is PS5 and PS4 because they can't get enough PS5s out to meet demand. So
Right.
Someday you won't have to see PS4 when they launch something.
But today is not that day.
Right. All right, next up, Square Enix announced a new strategy action RPG called the Dealfield Chronicle. It's coming to PlayStation 4 and 5 later this year. This is a fully 3D take on the strategy genre, and the trailer set up the story of the three kingdoms the game will focus on.
So it is strategy action RPG because we were discussing earlier, is it a tactics game? Is it a action game? This is a strategy action RPG. So I was thinking when we watched the segment that it kind of looked like a hybrid.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But even visually, it kind of looks like a spiritual successor to Final Fantasy Tactics.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking too.
Mm-hmm. I liked the visuals. It looked like it would be something fun to do. It's a different take on the strategy. Because I love tactics games. I always have. But you're right. As I think you were talking about before, it's not like you're fixed in one position where you have a grid that you have to work with, where this seems to be much more free-flowing. So I'd be definitely willing to check it out, for sure.
Up next, Valkyrie Elysium is coming to PlayStation 4 and 5 in 2022. The game is a new entry in Square Enix Valkyrie Profile series, which hasn't seen a home console entry since 2006's Valkyrie Profile 2, Silmeria on the PlayStation 2. We got a quick look at gameplay, which showed magic and sword combat against a variety of beast-like foes. What did you guys think of this one?
My very first impression of it was that the characters don't look very good.
I agree.
Do you think they looked very PlayStation 2-ish?
Kind of. They just seemed really stiff, the way they did their faces, the way they did their hair. I'm not sure why they chose to do it that way. I haven't played the previous games in the series, so I don't know if there's any connection there. But visually, the art style, I didn't really care for it just based on what we saw here. Mm-hmm. The gameplay looked fun, but there's nothing about it really that's making me go, ah. Now, I have, however, seen lots of people going, ah, on Twitter, fans of the rest of the Valkyrie games.
So that was that a good ah, or was that a bad ah for the fans?
The man makes a point.
I believe it was good.
Okay.
Sometimes on Twitter, you never know, but I believe it was good.
Right.
I'm a huge fan of Valkyrie Profile, but I've only played the first one, so I can't really say I'm a fan of the series per se. First one is fantastic. It's a lovely mix between turn-based combat and platforming, and the story is really fantastic. I've always loved that game, but to your point, I don't know if this really is an attractive kind of game to be released in 2022 as far as the visual and art style of this. Just didn't really catch my eye. So, yeah, I don't know. Dottie, do you think this is something you'd be getting into?
No, I don't think so. I'm with Blue. It doesn't look like it's appealing. It looks very rudimentary. If you have a great story, but the art looks like crap, are you going to continue to play the game just for the story?
I mean, that's what people did with Final Fantasy VII.
You watch it.
Oh my God, shots fired.
Am I wrong? Am I wrong?
At the time, that was cutting edge graphics.
Absolutely.
At the time, that first cutscene after they get out of the Shinra Tower had me,
if you say so.
Hop in your DeLorean, go 88 miles an hour, and get back to 1997.
Doc, we got to go back. We got to go back and play Final Fantasy VII.
Trust me.
Okay.
Also, tell your future self to invest in Google and Microsoft and Apple.
Actually, I will invest in Google, invest in Apple, stay away from the oysters. Be good to go.
And get into Bitcoin as soon as possible.
Yes. Use the money you make from investing in Google and Apple, get into Bitcoin.
And then get out.
Why aren't you writing this down?
I've got a mind like a steel trap.
No, I don't think I did.
That's a Bitcoin.
You'll see, Jimmy.
Okay, let's quickly go over the rest of the upcoming titles. Gigabash, a kaiju brawler, is coming to PS5 and PS4 this year. The gameplay footage showed off top-down 4-player battles between giant kaiju monsters that evoke the likes of Godzilla and friends.
Stranger of Paradise, as the Final Fantasy series takes on the Dark Souls formula coming from Nihon developer Team Ninja. The game is coming out next Tuesday, March 15th, and there is a new demo coming into the PlayStation Store today that you can try out one more time before the game releases. PS5 exclusive Ghostwire Tokyo is out later this month on March 25th, and the State of Play gave us another great look of this upcoming horror-infused open-world adventure.
Gundam Evolution was previously announced for Japan, but it's now been confirmed for a Western release later in 2022. The game is a 6v6 competitive online first-person shooter featuring the giant mechs you'd expect from the Gundam name. We also learned there's a network test coming this spring for players in the United States and Japan. You can play as 50 different characters from the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure universe in the upcoming fighting game, JoJo's All-Star Battle R. The game is coming to PS4 and PS5 this fall.
One of my favorite animes, of course, is Gundam. And this is Overwatch Gundam. And it doesn't even really look that cool. That's one of the coolest parts about Gundam Wing and Gundam R and all that stuff is that the Gundams look really cool. And they don't. They look super. I mean, you're talking about blocky artwork when it comes to Final Fantasy VII. This looks super blocky, too. Looked like it was a polygonal hell.
With no definition.
Disappointed yet again. Someday they will make the perfect Gundam game. It's going to happen. All right, so why don't we drop into our top 3 new releases for this week? Blue?
All right, first up is Chocobo GP. Platform is the Switch. Join Chocobo and friends as they hit the track in a variety of wacky vehicles. Learn the basics in story mode, then take on all comers in the game mode of your choice. Use classic magic spells like Fire and Arrow to blast the competition, or even turn the tables in a miracle comeback with each character's unique abilities. Young Souls is out on the PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. A gorgeous 2D brawler meets story-rich action RPG. Fight hordes of belligerent goblins, level up with hundreds of weapons and accessories, explore and journey between worlds as rebellious twins battle their way to save their foster father. And finally, WWE 2K22 out on the PS5, Xbox Series X and S, PS4, Xbox One, and PC. Redesigned engine.
Yes, you got to read it exactly as it's written.
Caps lock. Redesigned engine. New controls. All the features you can handle. Get ripped out of the stands and hit with complete control of the WWE universe. Hitting this hard has never been so easy. WWE 2K22, it hits different.
Jesus. You went from 100 miles an hour down to 5 miles an hour, then back up to 100 miles an hour.
Got to keep you on your toes.
Right?
I will not be hitting up WWE 2K22.
It hits different, just so you know.
Right.
I think I want to be hit differently, so I might check this out if it's a redesigned engine. It's been quite some time since I've actually played a wrestling game, and this is coming from somebody who has played all types of wrestling games from the NES, the Super Nintendo, the Sega Genesis, to arcades, to the first WWF game that came out on the PlayStation, which sucked. And then THQ hit home runs on the N64. And then everything after that subsequently was just kind of garbage for me. So now maybe they have a winner, but who knows? What are you playing, Blue?
Actually, I'm kind of glad it seems like a light week. I don't have to get a new game. I can try to catch up on stuff I already have. But Chocobo GP to me just kind of looks ridiculous. I think it's meant to look ridiculous. I don't know how you can approach a Final Fantasy kart racing game, but
is it all Chocobos, or because it says Chocobo and Friends? So are they going to have key characters from?
Yeah, so they've got a bunch of different Final Fantasy characters for sure.
I think I'm good there. I'm good there. If I was going to pick one, I would pick Young Souls RPG brawler. Sounds kind of fun. I watched a trailer on it. Like it's a coming of age story where you learn about friendship and family, but it's also rated mature. So I'm not sure those two things go together. But if I was going to pick one of these three, I would pick Young Souls.
It's because the goblins are so incredibly belligerent.
Right.
I think
super belligerent.
Right. I think it's a strange adjective to throw in front of there. Like goblins aren't always belligerent. You know, like Goblins go to work. They got a 9-to-5 job, you know, clock in, clock out.
A few belligerent goblins are ruining it for the rest of them.
So this game is a mature?
Yeah, it's rated M for mature.
Huh. Yet they're releasing it on the Switch.
Oh, Ryan knows about mature games on the Switch.
Oh, what are you talking about? Moving on. I think personally I'm going to check out Chocobo GP to see if it's a fun group kind of game.
Please do. I look forward to hearing all about it.
Right. Because I'm always looking for opportunities to do game nights and stuff. So if there's ever a game that really fits the bill, I'd be curious to find it. And this might be it. It's not Mario Kart, of course, but it may be something
going to try
different.
to be.
Oh,
right.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
That's the annoying part, is I kind of just want, if people are going to make kart racer games, I want a kart racer that's going to embrace and forge its own identity and not continually try to just be like a pale shadow of what Mario Kart does.
Everybody who loves Diddy Kong Racing just went,
well, if they would give us Diddy Kong Racing, if they would port it or remake it, something, that would be great, but not super relevant right now.
Agreed. What's Diddy Kong? The kids say.
Yeah.
But this is what happens when you have such a successful IP in the terms of Mario Kart, that any subsequent release that you try to make like Mario Kart, it just ends up falling flat because people are like, well, why am I going to spend $60 on this when I can just go play Mario Kart?
I'm not sure. I think Chocobo GP is a full price game.
So I might not be checking it out, though.
But you said.
Oh, sorry. It's $49.99. Whew.
Still too rich for my blood.
I was thinking maybe 15. Maybe.
Yeah, I was going to go $19.99 is what I thought was. So, yeah. Yeah, not so much. Can we get it?
So just so you know, this week, none of us will be buying any new games.
That's okay, because it's been a busy year so far, and we're only, what are we, 10 weeks in? Something like that.
That stack of backlog games that you purchased this year is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yes, because there's still plenty of big titles yet to come out this year.
Right.
Okay. First world problems.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So before we jump into our main topic interview with Howard Scott Warshaw, the first thing we want to do, of course, is thank our sponsor. And Gamers Week is proudly sponsored by the Retro Game Club podcast. It's a fantastic family-friendly retro gaming podcast. In each episode, Rob and Hugh pick 2 games to play and discuss, as well as news, interviews, and other topics. They've just released their episode 116, where they talk about Castlevania Undead Serious Redemption and the NES emulator that's too powerful for your PC. Visit retrogameclub.net to check them out or follow the link in the show notes.
It's too much power.
It's over 9,000.
Bringing out the Dragon Ball. I like it.
Anytime. And I was actually watching a web series that was out of Canada recently, and hearing the woman say Dragon Ball Z over and over and over again.
That sounds wrong. No
just
offense to our European friends, but that sounds wrong.
Right.
Right.
I just grew up on next up on Dragon Ball Z, you know, and to hear it called Z, just like, ugh, there was something that irked me there.
Definitely.
Do you guys want me to go get Howard Scott Warshaw from the green room?
Yeah, bring him in.
Yes, untie him.
Okay. I'll be right back.
Hey there, listeners. Just wanted to pause the show for a second to give our parents a warning out there. The upcoming interview does contain references to recreational drug use, so just FYI. And now, on with the show.
Anything that you want to share with us before we get started?
Just my life and intimate details.
We are listening.
If you want to party and go all night, we can definitely do that.
Getting closer.
Yeah. All right. So thank you all for joining us for this very special interview with one of the trailblazers of the video game industry, Howard Scott Warshaw. Howard is an artist, technologist, creator, and healer. but he is first and foremost a communicator. Holding master's degrees in counseling psychology and computer engineering, his career accomplishments include video game pioneer, Museum of Modern Art artist, a celebrated software developer, award-winning film producer, author, educator, and columnist. These days, Howard enlists his eclectic skill set in the service of others as a psychotherapist in California's Silicon Valley, where he specializes in issues of high-tech leaders and the super intelligent. He loves exploring fresh perspectives, as well as cultivating the new talents and finding creative ways to apply them. Howard is a complex person who can be summed up in 5 words: passion with a balanced perspective. So first of all, Howard, thank you so much for speaking with us today. It is an absolute pleasure.
Well, Ryan, the pleasure is mine. And what a fabulous introduction. I'm very impressed.
It's like I didn't write it, you know?
Well, excellent. You have a real future there, I'll tell you.
There we go. All right, so we wanted to have you on the show because in every episode of Gamers Week, we cover the stories behind the history of video games. And you recently published a book, an amazing book called Once Upon Atari, How I Made History by Killing an Industry, which we will include links in the show notes on where to find it, but that explores the experiences working for the juggernaut that was Atari Games in the early 1980s. We know our audience will love hearing it from the man who lived it. So if anybody who is unfamiliar with Howard Scott Warshaw, he worked for Atari Games from 1981 to 1984, where he developed 3 million plus sellers for the system, including Yars Revenge, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the infamous E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. So let's start things off from the beginning of your career with Atari, Howard. You're working at Hewlett-Packard, fresh out of graduate school, and you're not exactly feeling passionate or fulfilled working there. Can you walk us through what happened at Hewlett-Packard and how you ended up interviewing at Atari?
Well, you put it very kindly. The truth is I was struggling at Hewlett-Packard. Right. I was floundering because all the joy and passion that I had found in computers in college, which was like a real awakening for me, had suddenly disappeared as I started actually working in corporate America. And that was a very, very sad time for me. And the thing is, when I get sad, I don't just sort of melt down. I sort of act out. And that's what I was doing. And yep. I was doing that on a pretty regular basis. And one day, one of my coworkers came up and said to me, where my wife works, they do stuff like you do around here all the time. It seems to be what they do there. I said, really? I said, where's that? And he says, Atari. And I thought, Atari? I knew they made games, but I never really thought of it as a place to work. So I thought, well, I got to work there. So I called them up and wangled my way in and got a series of interviews, and everything seemed to be going great. And then they called me up and rejected me. They actually rejected me, but I only took that as an opening offer. I didn't really accept that as a permanent state of affairs because I knew Atari was a place for me. I just was clear because they did real-time control programming. They did the kind of programming I like to do. And it was a wacky place to work with interesting people. And actually, games was like a nice plus, but it wasn't really the reason I went to Atari. And so I basically whittled the guy down and negotiated myself into a 20% cut in pay and a probationary status. And that got me the opportunity to try out at Atari. And that was, I've never regretted making that deal.
Tenacity pays off.
Right? Indeed.
Absolutely. Pretty soon I worked my way up to only a 10% cut in pay. It was unbelievable.
Living the dream there.
Exactly.
Well, you alluded to this just a little bit in your answer, but Atari was known for being a pretty wild place to work. Can you provide us with some highlights of the antics at the office?
Yes.
I like the laugh.
No, I like the fact that I alluded to it because, life is an illusion, as people say. But there were many antics. There was lemon bocce played in the hallways. Frequently, there was action games being worked out in the hallways. There were people walking around speaking in odd tongues, and I didn't know exactly what that was. There was one guy who was walking around the hallway, and I usually have an ear for language. If I hear a language, I can at least figure out, I don't know what they're saying, but I can figure out what language it is. And I'd never heard anything like this. Somebody informed me that this was a guy who had grown up with a twin, and they had created their own language.
Twin speak.
And that he would walk around the hallways thinking out loud in this language. And I never did come to understand that language, or that guy for the most part. But interesting people there. And you'd find people there any hour of the day or night. There was always someone there working, not because someone was cracking the whip. It's because we all wanted to do it. We needed to do it. Doing a video game now is like a super collaborative effort, right? Doing a video game now is it's like a cruise ship. A cruise ship, you can have a lot of fun, you can hold a lot of supplies, and you can do a lot of great stuff on a cruise ship. The one thing you can't do is make a sharp turn. Okay. And that kind of inertia can be very threatening to a creative process and frustrating. At Atari was just the opposite. At Atari, there was nothing even remotely like a cruise ship. It was one person, one game, and you were on a speedboat. And you could make every sharp turn you could, and you could come to ground anywhere you wanted to, anywhere you could find a place to land. So you had a lot of freedom. What you didn't have was much gas, and you couldn't carry a lot of stuff, right? It was a very limited framework. And so you had to really readjust your sights, but it was total creative freedom. And it was an amazing place as a young guy in my early to mid 20s to have total creative freedom and be able to produce entertainment for potentially millions of people. I was there all the time because that's what I needed to do in my life then. And I was surrounded by other people who were interesting, fanatical, quirky, to be really polite about it, but really some strange characters, but who were fascinating. And I'm kind of an odd guy myself. I mean, you wouldn't know it to talk to me, but I can be a little weird at times. And I relish that. And I relish people who can keep up with me. And Atari was probably the single most creative and interesting group of people I've ever worked with. Just astounding. And it was just amazing to be there.
I can only imagine being able to work not only at Atari, but someplace like that, which allows that kind of creative freedom. And you want to go into work every day. And the fact that you've spent 12 hours there doesn't seem like you're working at all.
Not at all. I mean, you'd be there and just rolling along. I'll give you one story. I'd say one of the earliest stories to give you an idea of what it's like, because coming into an environment like that, I'm coming from a corporate environment. So my idea of what's kind of freewheeling and stuff wasn't exactly calibrated yet. Okay, so
yet.
On my first day I was there, a guy comes up to me, one of the fellow programmers, and he's welcoming me, saying hello, and this is cool. And I noticed that he had like an alligator clip, like a roach clip, on his belt, just sitting there in the open, and I could tell by the stained tip that it had been used recently. And I thought, I'm down with smoking a joint here and there at Atari, but I thought he probably doesn't, maybe he forgot that it's there. So I said, by the way, your roach clip is showing, and because I didn't want him to be embarrassed by walking around somewhere and having it exposed.
Right.
And he looks at me and he goes, that's okay. He goes, you don't have to worry about that. That's all right. And I thought, okay, this is a little different. And then later that day, this is like on my first day there, at the end of the day, I was put in an office with two, well-established engineers there, one of which was a pretty wild dude. And I tell this story in the book. It's about how I was there and I knew people, like to get high a lot at Atari because I had interviewed there, and it didn't take long for that to come up in the interviews, to tell you the truth. And so,
what a hit.
I rolled a joint. I came, it was the only job I've ever gone to where I made sure the first day I had a joint with me. And so I came in and I was all set just in case. I wanted to be, because, I wanted to be polite. Wanted to be a contributor, as it were. And I'm sitting in my room reading a manual, and the other office mate, a guy named Todd Fry, another well-known character in video game history. And he comes blowing into the room and he slams the door behind him and he sits down, he pulls out a baggie and he just sort of, flips his hand and just unravels it. And there's this like amazing collection of green and purple stuff inside the baggie. And I'm looking at that and thinking, okay. And he looks at me and he goes, look, I'm going to get high in here. So if you don't want to be around this, you need to go. And no introduction. This is the first time I'm seeing him. Okay. And it's like, and I looked at him, I said, oh no. I said, I said, if you don't mind, I'd be happy to join you. I said, in fact, I said, here, I've got a joint already rolled, if you'd like to partake. And he looks at me and he looks at the joint. He goes, no offense, but I'm smoking some real stuff here. So, I don't want to do that. I thought, wow, pot snob. But I said to him, I said, okay, you mind if he goes, you can join me if you want. I said, well, sure. And I tried it. And I thought, wow. I thought,
on your first day.
And his stuff was way better than what I had. And I thought, if I'm really going to be okay here at Atari, I'm going to have to up my game in a variety of ways. And so this is my introduction. This is, day one.
Oh, man.
Most people just have to go through HR.
You'll watch the training video.
Right.
So, Howard, your first game, Yars Revenge, arguably one of the best games on the Atari.
Well, I hope you're not looking for an argument from me.
Would you say it sucks or not? No. Do you mind walking us through your thought process as you develop Yars?
I'd be happy to pop the freshness seal on my brain and take a stroll with you. Absolutely. So Yars Revenge is always going to be, they say you never forget your first one.
Indeed.
Right.
Yars is the game that is always going to be, in my heart. And it wasn't Yars Revenge until the very end. At first, see, here's the thing. I got hired there and I was on probation and I had begged and pleaded my way in. Let me do anything. I'll do anything you want. Just give me a chance to prove myself. So they hired me on, and after a couple of days, I was just looking at the manual. I kind of got the idea of what was going on with the VCS. And here's my first assignment, and it's a coin-op game. It's a coin-op conversion, like we say, a game called Star Castle. So I played that game a little bit, and I knew what I knew about the VCS, and I was no expert at this point, but it didn't take a tremendous amount of experience to realize that if I were to just try and convert this particular coin-op to the VCS, it was going to suck. It was going to absolutely suck. And I could not afford to have my first game suck. So here I am on probation. The manager has just assigned my first project. And so a day later, I went in to talk to him. I said, I don't really think, we should do this game. I don't think this is the way to go. And he's like, what? But I didn't just say, forget it, I won't do this game. I had worked up my own ideas about something I thought would use some of the dynamics of that game, but was better adapted for the machine. I said, here's what we should do instead. I think, and I made a whole presentation about it. And I got to give the guy credit, and he said, okay, why don't you go for it? Why don't you try that? So I had actually talked my way into Atari, and then I had talked my way out of my first assignment. And so I was right chuffed, as they say. I was like, really, I was psyched. And I thought, here we go. I'm making my own path. I'm making my future. And I start working away on this game, which was not Yars Revenge yet. It was an unknown game that had a working title of Time Freeze, because the one thing I knew about this game was it was going to have the most amazing payoff screen. Whenever you do whatever it is you have to do in this game, because I didn't know what that was yet, but whenever it is you do it, there's going to be this fabulous full screen payoff that's going to be really exciting. And it was going to be this whole action sequence, and that the word Time Freeze would have made sense with that, at least in my head, in the concept. as the case with many creative projects, I did not realize 100% of that vision. So I started to put up things on the screen. I put up an animation right away when people usually just put up a block and start moving it around the screen. And I started putting up some visual effects that people know from Yars Revenge. And it looked really cool because I wanted to draw attention. I wanted people to look at my game and go, wow, that's cool. What is that? That's what I wanted to do. And I had achieved that. Right after a little while, I'd been working there and now people are going, wow, that's cool. What does it do? And I'd say, I don't know yet. Haven't gotten that part yet. But the fact that you're asking shows I'm on the right path. So, and I worked on it. I worked on it for a while and I got the game basically what I wanted to do with it. And so people started playing it and I played it a little and we looked at it and it sucked. I mean, it was horrible. It was a totally unfun experience. And I thought, oh, no, this is horrible. And I felt really not good because I had really worked my way into this position. And now a hoist on my own petard, as they say, right? This was the classic falling on your sword. But I kind of got over the depression and then started taking some feedback and I made a few changes and twitched some things around. And then suddenly people were digging the game. I mean, really loving this game. And I thought, yeah, this is more like what the game making experience is all about. And it was almost creepy. I mean, people were loving the game and it was just really cool. And I thought, okay, I had all these great visuals and I had some of these great pop. And then I had some gameplay finally. And so it was all kind of coming together. So then it was time to name the game. And so they told me, the marketing rep told me that they're going to be naming the game. And I said, well, are you taking suggestions? Can I make a submission? And he goes, well, sure. I don't think they've finished the process yet. I said, okay, this is like mid-afternoon. I said, come back here tomorrow morning and I will have a submission for you. He goes, okay. Because all I knew was I was so invested in this game and I didn't want some lame name to go on top of it. I wanted to make sure everything about this game was as cool as I could possibly make it, which in my opinion was going to be cool. So once again, I embark on this little endeavor where I don't know where I'm going, but I really want to go there. And what do? I'm trying to think of names for this thing. And it's like when you try to make up words, I have to tell you that one of the things on my bucket list, one of my big dreams has always been to add a word to the English language. I just always thought that would be cool. And I figured English is my best shot, better than French or something like that. So I thought, if this game gets really popular and then the names of the characters that I make up for this, those could actually become words. I thought this is the best shot I may ever have. And so I thought, okay, I got to make up something really cool. And, when you try to just make up a new word, everything sounds stupid. At least it did for me. I was very frustrated. But, I'm a programmer, so I thought, instead of just making something up, let's come up with an algorithm. Let's have a reason behind it. Let's make it something, make it mean something. And I thought, okay, so what am I going to do? So the first thing I thought was, well, it'll be like a 1 or 2 word title. I want it to be a simple title. And what's a good title word? And I thought, revenge. Revenge is a good title. It's an action word and everybody wants revenge, right? So I figure revenge is good. And now who is this? So somebody's taking revenge. There's these, whatever the main character is. I didn't really have a name for it or what it was. And then I thought, okay, so I'm thinking maybe I'll use a cipher. Maybe I'll use a crypto thing to figure out what to do. And I thought, okay, so what's something that's meaningful that I could use? I thought, well, the CEO of the company's name is Ray Kazar. So let's play with that. And I thought, Ray, well, we'll spell that backwards. That's Yar. Oh, yeah, Yar. Yar, that sounds cool. It's very sci-fi. It's got a Y. As long as it's got a Y or an X or a Z in it, sounds sci-fi. Right. So it's all good. And then I said, Kazar, you spell that backwards, Razak. Oh, yeah. So that's good. So now I've got Yars and Razak. It'll be like a Razak solar system, and the Yars will be the character, and it's Yars Revenge. And then, so I thought, okay, we got that. So that's kind of cool. And then I started to make up some names for the other characters, like the monster is a cotile, right? And the reason it's a cotile is because one of the things I always resented is what I think are ridiculous rules. And the idea that you must always have a U after a Q, I don't care for that rule. So I thought, here's a chance to make up something where there's a Q that's not followed by a U. So I thought that was cool. So that's where Kotile came from. And the Zorlon cannon, I'm still not really sure where that came from, because it was either going to be like, this amazing weapon, or it was going to be like the latest, fabric replacement, for nylon. It's Zorlon. It's easier to clean. So that came up. And then the middle part, I said, well, it's the ion zone because it glitters, it's ionic, it's very cool. And I thought, ion zone, well, what is that really? Where did that come from? And then it occurred to me, okay, I started to do my little story thing, because I always like to make up stories for things. And I thought, this whole revenge thing, I got a whole scenario here, because there's this monster, the Kotile, and there's the Yar on the other side, and there's this cool glittery thing in the middle. That's going to be one of the planets, and that's what the revenge is about. So then this whole thing sprung in my mind about how it's there's this monster who came to the solar system that the Yars had inhabited, and it blew away one of their planets, killing a whole bunch of their brethren and sistren. And at that point, the Yars need to take revenge. They're going to go out and get this monster back for destroying, one of their planets and a lot of their compatriots. So I thought, that's cool. And then there's the question of, well, how did Yars become Yars? Where do they come from? And I started to think about that. And the next thing I know, I sat down and just started writing out on this notepad. I wrote out like a 9 or 10 page story about how houseflies get on the first interstellar spaceship, and then they get irradiated, just like every B movie in the 50s and 60s, right. The monster. And they grew, and they turned into these super flies that destroyed the humans and used the ship to get to their own solar system. They inhabited that. And that's how Yars came to be Yars. And then there's the whole thing about the Kotile showing up and blowing them away. And now there's the big battle, and away we go. So I wrote this whole, this sci-fi story that I thought was a fairly adult version, because I thought to myself, a story and a name is way better than just a name. Right. And so I had this whole story, and then by now it's 3:30, 4 in the morning. I'm still in my office. So I just laid down on my chair. Laid my chair on the floor, laid down on the floor, and just got some sleep. About 7:30, when the admins started coming in, I gave them the stuff, and they were kind enough to type it up for me, because I couldn't type for crap. And they typed it up, and then here comes the product manager, and he takes it, and away we go. So the next day, the product manager comes by again, and I said, did it get in? Did my submission go? He goes, yeah, it's under consideration. I said, have they decided yet? He goes, no, not quite yet. And then I decided to pull my own little marketing trip. Okay. Because I'm not just a programmer. So I said to him, I said, I want to tell you something. I said, but I don't want you to share it with anybody. This is going to be our secret. Okay. And he's like, yeah. And I said, but really, I don't want this to unfairly bias the naming of the project. So I don't want you to share this with anyone. Okay. And he goes, yeah, swears he won't do it. I said, wink. Okay. Exactly. So I said, this Yar, Yar because this was the Yarian Revenge of Razak 4 was the title of the story that I wrote. That was the official title. Okay. I said, Yar, this thing Yar, what's that spelled backwards? And he goes, Ray. And I go, yeah. Yeah. And then Razak, that solar system. I go, what's that spelled backwards? And he thinks about it. He goes, Kazar, Ray Kazar. He goes, Ray Kazar. He goes, does Ray know about this? And I said to him, of course. I said, I wouldn't do anything like this without Ray knowing. I said, but I don't want this to interfere with anything. That's why I want you to keep it a secret, because I don't think it'll be fair if people know that Ray's involved with this. And he goes, okay. And I said, okay. And I swore him to secrecy one more time. And he says, okay. And then he takes off. And at this point, I know 3 things, right? I know that the first thing he's going to do is run right back to marketing and tell everybody about this. I know that's going to happen. I also know that nobody in marketing really has the balls to say anything to Ray, because he's too many, levels up from where they're at. And that's a good thing, though, because the third thing I know is that Ray has no idea about this whatsoever. I pulled this out of my ass. And I'm just doing this. And so that was it. I put it out. And then the next day, he comes back to VCS. He goes, guess what, Howard? We're going to go with Yars Revenge. We're going with it. He goes, in fact, we're going to make a comic book to go along with the game to show the story and all that. And I said, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. I was tempted to say to him, you didn't tell anybody, did you? But I just couldn't do that. I couldn't do that to him. So it was like, and there it was. And so that's how Yars Revenge became Yars Revenge. That's how it got named. And the cool thing was about 5-6 months later, because this is like in July, about 5-6 months later, I'm playing a demo. There's a big press demo, and a lot of the programmers are there playing on these giant screen TVs while execs and media people are running around. And at one point, Ray sort of emerges from the crowd, and he steps up to me, and he goes, hey, Howard. And I go, hey, Ray, what's up? He goes, I heard what you did in that with the Yars Revenge name. I go, yeah. I go, how'd you like that? He goes, well, keep making games, Howard. Just keep making games. And then he sort of melted back into the crowd. So that's how Yars Revenge became Yars Revenge. And that's
love it.
That's a great story.
And it went on to be a huge game because I think it was Atari's best-selling original game. And it actually established a bunch of firsts. In the game industry. It had pause mode, full screen explosion, death sequences, and it had the first backstory. I didn't realize that what I was doing was creating the backstory for video games. So whenever you hear a backstory now, I originated that thing. It was just kind of cool. And all it was me just trying to find a better way to sell the name to avoid getting marketed.
Right.
Whatever works.
And so it was, but that's what I did. There's that. I'll tell you another story if you like. Well, shorter one.
Yeah.
But
by all means.
This will give you an idea of what I was like and what it was like to be there. Was, occasionally we would have guest speakers. People would come in and chat or tell us about, technologies or things like this. And, I had a beard. If you look at the cover of the book, you'll see I have a full beard and mustache. But every once in a while I would get tired of it and I want to shave it off. And the thing is, when you're going to do something like that, something that you can only do every once in a while, I always try to think, can I do something extra with this? Can I do something fun or creative or cool or just amusing? And I thought, one thing that'd be kind of cool would be to shave like half the beard and the other half of the mustache, right? Because I've never had that look before. And I thought that would be an interesting thing to do. So I did that. So I shaved, one half of my beard and the opposite half of my mustache. And so what I could do is I could put my hand over half my, you sit on a desk and you got your elbow on the desk and your hands against your cheek. So I could do that. So if I do it one way and it looked like I just have a mustache, and then I could do it the other way and it looked like I just have a beard. and it turned out that the day I did that and I came in, we had a guest speaker. And I didn't know. So what I did was I showed up early for the talk and I took the position, we're holding my hand over my cheek, and I sat there waiting for everything to start and got going. And this guy comes in and starts talking. And I just thought it'd be fun to pull this switch on him, right? So I'm listening to him, and that's he's why. And every once in a while, he turns around to write something on the board. And every time he turned around to write on the board, I'd switch hands. And so now he's seeing the other side of it. And I did that once and he didn't really notice, The thing is, when I first came into work, hardly anybody noticed at all, which also says something about Atari. It wasn't particularly unusual. And so, but I switched a few times and like after a little while, he'll turn around from the board and then he looks at me and he kind of double takes and looks at me, but he goes on talking and then I did it again. And then he looked at me again. Like really strange. And then he went back to write on the board. And I did it one more time. And this third time he turns around and he looks at me. He goes, what is up with you? What are you doing? And at that point, I just put both my hands up in the air. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. and he looks at me, he goes, what? He goes, who shaves off half their face like that? And everybody in the room goes, Howard does. And then some people said, or maybe Todd. Todd would do that too. So that would be a classic Atari moment, I would say.
Love it.
That's awesome.
Love it. Yeah. So I know we're only running for a few more minutes here, but we would probably be remiss if we didn't discuss the 800-pound gorilla in the room. So, of course, ET for the 2600.
Oh, let's do it. I've heard of this ET game.
So it was a widely ambitious game with probably the shortest timeline ever conceived. Not to mention it was one of the hottest IPs out at the time. So what was going through your head when you agreed to do ET in only 5 weeks?
What was going through my head was, hell yeah, I can do this. The CEO, Ray Kazar, this was another one of our little conversations. We didn't have a lot of conversations, Ray and I, but we had that one with the Yars, and we had this one. He called me up. I'm sitting in my office. I had just finished Raiders of the Lost Ark, which was a very long, very difficult development. And I was kind of burnt out and was looking forward to taking a break after Raiders. And I get this call, hey, will you hold for Ray Kazar? I'm like, Ray Kazar, the guy who signs my checks? Yes, I will hold for him. And he comes on the phone. He goes, Howard, we need ET for September 1st. Can you do it? This is July 27th. And without even really thinking about it, I just said to him, I said, absolutely, I can do this. I said, provided we reach the right agreement. He knew exactly what I meant. And so, and he said, okay, this is a Tuesday afternoon, right? He said, Thursday morning at 8 a.m., there's going to be a Learjet waiting at San Jose Executive Terminal. Be on it. And we're going to go and present the design to Spielberg. So not only do I only have 5 weeks to do a game, I only have 36 hours to design it and prepare a presentation on it. It's like, holy crap. Of course, if you're going to do a game in 5 weeks, you can't take much more than that to design it. Right. And I thought about it, and then I went through a real specific thinking process about how to do it and came up with what I did. But, the thing is, in that moment when he said, can you do it? I said, absolutely. And I meant it. I really believed at this point, I was 2 for 2 on pretty hot games.
Right.
And I really felt I had understood the system enough, and I understood me and the goal and the project enough that I believed I could pull it off. Because I'm not sure exactly what it was I was full of at that moment, but whatever it was, I was overflowing with it.
Well, and not to mention that you've already hit a home run with an existing Steven Spielberg property, correct?
Yeah, well, Spielberg had actually specifically asked for me to do this. He was happy enough with our exchanges on Raiders, and he liked the result of what I had on Raiders. That's another great story. There's a lot of really good Atari stories. What can I tell you?
Indeed.
And I would love to hear them all.
I'd love to tell you.
A lot of those are in the book. Trust me. There are so many fantastic stories.
See, the thing is, people call it the worst game of all time, right? E.T. is the worst game of all time. And, I don't believe that for a second. I know that E.T. is not the worst game, but to tell you the truth, I really prefer it when people do identify it as the worst game of all time. I kind of like that.
Really?
Yeah, because Yars Revenge is frequently cited as one of the best games of all time. So as long as E.T. is the worst game, I have the greatest range of any game designer in history. And I'm proud of that distinction.
That's quite a flex, yeah.
You got both sides of the coin.
So that goes under the no such thing as bad press category, I guess. Which,
right.
People are really testing that theory these days. I'll tell you that.
Indeed.
Well, Howard, do you have time for one more question, or do we need to wrap this up?
I can't let it go at this point. We have to take at least one more question. We just have to.
Excellent. All
because I know the meaning of the word commitment.
We appreciate that. Crunch has been a hot topic today in video game development.
Brunch? I'm always up for brunch.
Right?
We'll have mimosas, French toast. It'll be great.
Oh, yeah. No, but you're talking about crunch mode. Yeah.
Yes. And as someone who has experienced a 5-week marathon crunch session yourself, what are your thoughts on this practice?
My thoughts are very crispy on this topic.
Excellent.
So crunch mode, here's the thing. One of the problems with E.T., among all the problems with E.T.,
one of the
big problems with E.T. is that I actually achieved virtually 100% of my design intent. with ET. And that's really a problem. And I'll explain to you why, because it doesn't sound like a problem, right? You say someone says, hey, how'd you do on that project? Realized 100% of my design. Oh, that's too bad. I'm sorry to hear that. But see, here's the thing is in any kind of, especially in creative development, when you start off with an initial concept, you're hoping that the final project deviates substantially from that concept because it veers off because it gets better. Okay. The thing is, the reason a lot of creative projects don't resemble the original design is because along the way, we figured out a better way to do something, or we figured out something cooler to do, or we managed to work something out or check it or test it along the way. And we could accentuate, the things that worked and start to reduce the things that don't. And I call that there's a thing I call rumination time in the development. And that is that when you're doing something as intense as programming the 2600, the VCS, it is an intense exercise and you can get tunnel visioned. And so you're doing what you do because you're just hanging on by your teeth trying to even get that going. And you're not really thinking, is this the best thing I can do? You're thinking, can I even do this? And so you do that. And then at some point you get so involved and so stuck in what you're doing that it's really hard to see it, clearly what's going on. And so at some point you need to take yourself out of it. You need to step away from the project. When it's substantially in place, you need to be able to step away, lose it, forget it, and then be able to come back to it with fresh eyes to be able to handle the inevitable criticism that's coming down the road. Right? And so, you want to be able to respond reasonably to that. You also want to be able to see the shortcomings, because when people say, well, this part doesn't really work, and you're like, screw you. Do you know how hard it was to put that thing in? Right. Oh my God. And you're like, oh, don't tell me to go there. So, you have to get past that. Okay. And you have to get over yourself. You have to get over that stuff. And you have to be able to hear people when they're going to criticize it. And you need to be able to respond to it. And you need some distance for that to happen, because when you start doing a game in that kind of environment, you're too close. And what crunch mode does is it forces your face right up against the mirror. And I mean that both literally and metaphorically in a lot of places where people work these days. So it's like, it forces you into a place where you don't have that perspective. And that's the big problem with crunch mode. Rumination time gives you a chance to step away. It gives you a chance to let, your forebrain and your back brain is a way to look at it, right? Your forebrain is your intentional conscious thought. And it's okay, I can say this because I'm a psychotherapist, which is actually true.
He has a license.
I do. I am licensed and ready to talk. So it's, you have conscious thought, which is all your intentional stuff and what's going on. But when you get these things, these moments of discovery where you're in the shower, you're doing something else, you're doing something totally unrelated, suddenly you go, aha, there it is. That's because your brain doesn't stop working on problems when you're not thinking about them. In fact, sometimes your brain works more effectively on things when you're not thinking about it. But when you're in crunch, you don't get a chance to not think about it. And so you're stuck in the same solutions to the same problems, and it's hard to access the parts of your brain that are going to give you stray possibilities, the left field kind of stuff that really makes a difference, that can really suddenly bring a game to life. And in E.T., I never got a chance to do that rumination time. If I would have made, like in the book, I discussed there's several time frames. What I would have done with E.T. if I had one more day, if I had one more week, or if I had 2 more months. And those are very different. But literally in one more day, if I'd have had the vision and the clarity to do it, I could have undid a lot of the major problems that happen in that game. Now, I think that's a fact, and there's no problem with that. But when sometimes people ask me, well, if you could go back and make those changes, would you? And, to be brutally honest with you, the truth is, I don't know that I would, right? Oh. Because if I went back and made those changes, E.T. would have done better. It would have been, a passable or an enjoyable game. And you know what the problem with that would have been? That I would not have gotten the chance to spend this fun time with all of you. And I really would have missed that.
Oh, man.
He knows how to win people's hearts. That's for
Indeed,
sure.
right?
I mean, you are talking about a complete different timeline. If E.T. is
Right.
a success, then maybe Atari does or doesn't fail. And what if Atari succeeds and is the ultimate powerhouse to this day because you weren't able to go back and change some stuff?
Well, one thing I discuss extensively in the book Once Upon Atari is what exactly did contribute to the crash. And
Right.
it's not about E.T. I love
Right.
the fact that people think E.T. destroyed the industry and therefore I destroyed the industry. You know, and I can tell you the truth is whenever you have a tragedy, and I think the video game crash the early 80s qualifies as a tragedy for many people.
Indeed.
The thing is, whenever you have a tragedy, you know, as journalists yourselves, right, is that when you're going to tell the story, a big story, you need the eyes of someone who's involved. You need to personalize it. You need a face for a tragedy to be able to tell the story. And so what happened was E.T. became the face of the video game crash, and I was relegated to be the butt behind that face, I think is basically how that went. But the crash is a much bigger story, and I do discuss that extensively. And it's not about E.T. It's true that, you know, no one game destroyed the industry. Okay,
Right,
that's just a fantasy, but it's a fun fantasy. It's a very complex, you know, web of events. And the truth is, with my background as an economist, as a mathematician, as an engineer, as a psychotherapist, and all of that stuff, I think I was able to finally, after, you know, 25 years of reflection, was able to put that together into a cohesive picture that I think really stands up. A lot of people have read that and feel it's a really coherent explanation. And
For sure. And to your point, I think one of the things that you've done at the end of the book is kind of wrapped it all up, and it made it more of a story that felt good, right? Where it has a good ending. And as you kind of pointed out to it, you know, we wouldn't be talking if you didn't get to go through that experience through life. So I really loved kind of your clarity of thought, if you will.
Thank you. That really means a lot to me, because being clear is something I strive for all my life. And it's important. And, you know, in fact, what's interesting is that as a therapist, and a lot of people are very surprised to see, you know, how could a programmer become a therapist? And, you know, I get why people ask that question, you know, but what they're really saying is, programmers have no people skills. How do you think they're going to be a therapist, you know, doing that? But if you really think about, I don't see it as that strange a transition, although a lot of people do. To me, it made perfect sense on one level, because if you think about it, programmers and therapists were all systems analysts, right? All I did was I moved on to much more sophisticated hardware in the human brain.
Right.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Well, Howard, we don't want to keep you for too long here, so thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It was a great experience getting a chance to hear the history of Atari from your perspective. This was fantastic.
Oh, it was my pleasure. It was great to talk with you. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure being had. And I got to tell you that if, you know, there's too much to talk about in just this time, but if you want to talk again, I'm not dead yet.
We would love to have you back on the show.
Yeah, I'll make that the title of the episode. I'm not dead yet.
Oh, beautiful. You know, I don't know how it will age, but I love it for now.
Right? Oh, jeez.
Now, Howard, I missed you at PRGE 2019. I know you were out there. I was out there as well, but I only spent one day. I had a very short time window. Are you going to be at any other video game conventions here in the future?
I'm seeing a lot of invitations to conventions. If I can go to any convention this year, PRGE, if they do it, would be one I really want to attend. And, you know, I'm playing it, you know, pretty low and slow in the pandemic kind of stuff going on, but that has to open up at some point. And I'm going to do my best to start showing up at some places because I want to be there. You wouldn't believe this, you know, to interview me, but I actually like talking to people.
No.
Really?
No, it's true. It's true.
I didn't get that at all. Well, if you do show up there, I would love to sit down and have a chat and talk to you for a little bit.
That would be great. I'd
Yes,
love that.
Donnie will buy you brunch.
Yes.
I'm comfortable with that too. As long as he leaves out the crunch, I'm totally good with it.
I love it.
You know, you have 2 minutes to eat this meal.
Right. And go.
But thank you so much. It really was a pleasure being here.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was all ours.
Yes, definitely.
sure.
Thank you.
It's cool. I mean, I do got to get rolling, but I'm sincere. I mean, I'd be happy to talk with you guys again.
Definitely. This was fantastic. Absolutely.
Yeah, we will absolutely take you up on that at some point.
And I'll tell you, I could really tell that you had read the book from your questions. So I really appreciate that, because some people say, yes, of course we'll read the book before then. And then I can tell they haven't seen anything in the book. You guys had totally seen the book. And I really did appreciate that.
Love it.
We're big fans, basically.
Yes. Howard, real quick, do you play any video games now?
Oh yeah.
Okay, good. That makes
Oh
my
yeah.
heart
I'm
warm.
not playing a lot of console games. It's sad to admit, but I am like so stuck on like all of the Candy Crush stuff, the Soda Crush, the whole King family of it's my motto, get a game and you can waste a weekend, learn to make games and you can waste a career.
There it is.
That's deep. That's very deep.
I actually
It's
do
all
have
good.
a bachelor's degree in game art and design, and I've never used it.
Well, you're not wasting your career then.
I know, right?
You got to get on that.
Well, you've got some wasting to do.
I know. Eventually I will waste
Comes
it.
to video games, people understand the concept of wasted.
Howard, thank you very much for taking your time.
Thank you, Howard. This has been amazing.
Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. It was fun talking with all of you. Take care, and love to talk to you again.
Howard, thank you so much again for taking the time to speak with us. We had a great time, and we hope to have you back on the podcast soon. We are giving away an autograph set that includes Once Upon a Time in Atari, How I Made History by Killing an Industry, and a DVD of the documentary Once Upon Atari, directed by Howard Scott Warshaw. The autograph will be personalized with the name of the giveaway winner. To enter, all you got to do is check out Retro Gamers' pinned tweet starting here on Friday, March 11th. We will be accepting entries all the way until Tuesday, March 15th. Take a picture or a screenshot showing you listening to the most recent episode of Gamer Roots Week. For more details, definitely check out that pinned tweet from Retro Game Brews. So thank you all for listening to episode 12 of Gamers Week Podcast, and a big thank you to the Retro Game Club podcast for sponsoring this episode. Don't forget to check out their links in the show notes. If you want to connect with Gamers Week, follow us on Twitter at GamersWeekPC, email us at gamersweekpodcast@gmail.com, visit our merch store at the longest web address of all time, gamers-week-podcast.creator-spring.com. And if you want to do it the easy way, follow the link in the show notes. Of course, join us on Patreon at patreon.com/GamersWeek. Finally, since you made it all the way to the end of the episode, please leave us a rating and a review to let us know how we did. We really value your feedback. While you're there, consider subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice. Have a good night, everybody.
I know what our tagline should be.
What?
What's
It
that?
should be Gamers Week Podcast. It hits differently.
It just hits differently. I like it.
Yep.
I second that motion.
It's completely original. I just came up with it off the top of my head.
Genius. Good night, everybody.
Hope everybody hits differently.